Or Connor. Hannah's a hottie. You can marry her.
She's my size now. Hey.
Yeah, normal size.
No Spanish speaking in my mission.
Just, where'd you go again? Scotland? Scottish speaking?
Yeah.
Did you come home with a thick accent?
Most of them didn't have accents. There's some that sort of preserve the tradition and keep their accents.
Yeah.
So was it more of a British accent then that they had for the most part, or?
They're just different than the English.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you ever call them English,
They get really mad.
Oh.
they get you a little bit irritated at them.
Oh, the gravy is chunky today.
That's good.
It's just congealed now.
So when did you serve your mission, Grandpa?
1947 and 1949.
That's so cool.
Weren't you a Relief Society president? Weren't you the Relief Society president?
Oh, I won for a while with the branch.
That's cool. We'll have something in common. My patriarchal blessing says I'll be Relief Society president someday.
There's a
So
little
there we
difference
go.
between you and me.
Very true. We'll have the same title.
I still think it's awesome. Oh, the gravy
Well,
tastes
they didn't have any women that were willing to take that responsibility.
So you stepped up.
But they all wanted to do it. It was more like a club than it was a...
Nice. So you're president of the club. You've been cooler. Done.
I don't think I taught any lessons,
Sorry.
but I think I did call some people for teachers.
That's cool.
So we did have a lesson.
That's what a good president does. Delegation.
Delegation. Get somebody else to do it.
Yep.
Exactly.
I'm the primary president and I've only
Got to church like 3 times.
I haven't done anything.
It's a little hard to find people to do things, huh?
Yeah, well, my presidency is fantastic,
Well, then again, you did just have a baby, so
Well,
that's a different
yeah.
story.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that your primary is going to run itself while you're down.
You'd
And
like
mine
to think
is,
that.
so that's nice.
So what areas did you pass in on your mission, Grandpa? What areas did you pass in? What cities and stuff on your mission? Do you remember any?
I spent 8 months in each district. Started in Glasgow, just north of Glasgow, in a little town, and I've forgotten the name of it right now.
Mhm.
Then I spent 1 8-month period in Dundee, and another one in Aberdeen.
Cool.
No, excuse me, another one in Edinburgh.
Okay.
Sounds like the Lord of the Rings.
A little bit.
What the heck? He's gonna stop.
Edinburgh is the capital, right?
It's hilarious.
Edinburgh is the
You're going
capital.
facing that direction.
Was
That's
it-
because that's where Balmoral is, which is the
Keep what?
King of England's castle.
That's
Crap,
cool.
what
Did
did
you get to see the castle? Like,
Oh,
go
yeah.
and visit? You go inside of it?
I didn't go inside,
No.
but you couldn't miss it because it's right in the middle of town.
Big structure.
Close.
Yeah.
Alright. Hi, Lou.
Guys, what are you doing?
You don't need to yell, buddy.
Guys, what are you doing?
We're talking to Grandpa about his mission.
Yeah.
Whoa.
You're in here, you gotta be quiet, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Grandpa. Can you see it? There.
Yeah, I see him.
Where are you going?
Why don't you just talk?
The beginning of my mission was a little sad because when we tried to get in through the customs, it was kind of interesting. I went through very nicely, and Then I had to go back and pick up something or other. But when I went through customs the second time, they said, "Where's that camera?" I had a camera on the first time. I should have taken it off. I didn't know I was going to have trouble. And they wouldn't let me through. And so they took it over, and I never did see it.
Oh. Oh.
So I didn't have a camera for most of my mission.
Sucks.
And then after getting out of the airport, I guess we went out to dinner, and I asked for a glass of milk. And he said, "Oh, what are you, a baby?" These are some of the events that I remember.
Be like, no, I just like to have strong bones.
I said, "What's the problem?"
Are you scared of
And one of
babies?
my companions says, "You got to realize this is just after the war, and we're still on pretty limited resources. They didn't get. They had to import milk. They didn't have enough cows to feed them, so and anything you imported was hard for the financial economy of Britain. So they didn't import very much of it." And the only people that were allowed to have it was people with children, babies.
Interesting.
It sucks.
That I learned afterwards, of course.
Yeah. So, did you have many American companions, or were they all European, or?
They were all American.
Okay.
Martha.
Yeah, two of them were from Utah, and one of them was from Nevada.
Cool.
Nevada guy was an airplane specialist. Spent a good amount of time on his mission building model airplanes.
Nice.
Yeah.
But it served as a item of discussion. There were a lot of the young people who were interested in. He'd get out and fly them after,
That's even cooler, actually. Yeah.
and so they came and watched, and we introduced ourselves.
Cool.
Should teach our missionaries that.
So it was good work. They probably had to figure out something else though. That would have painted the area.
I still think kids would think that'd be cool.
Oh, I agree. You should have mentioned that to them, Caitlin.
Oh, they don't listen to me. They don't like me.
Hello, Judy.
Yeah.
He's awkward.
It was in Dundee that I was the Relief Society president.
You were there for 8 months?
Yeah.
Cool.
It was 8 months, 8 months, 8 months. That was the system of the mission.
Nice. It's better than my mission. 4 months here, 2 weeks there, 6 months here, a week here.
Yeah, I get letters here from Fletcher, and they shift around every 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of hard because they have a lot of contacts and then they have to lose them again.
Yeah.
Is that the biggest plate you can find?
I like small plates because then I'd have to dirty a whole lot of stuff.
And you can get like, you can get 7 plate loads and feel like he's not eating a lot.
Yeah, that's the trick right there.
Matt, you are the weirdest person alive. I love you.
There's cranberry.
Yeah, cranberry was good.
So where did you meet Grandma at?
New York City. Was going to school at Columbia.
Smarty
And,
pants.
Pardon?
Smarty pants.
I love that.
I went to I lived in Manhattan, and she was there as a nurse intern at the New York hospital, where incidentally Greg was born.
Cool.
That's awesome.
It was nice because the employees got almost free service.
Nice.
Gotta give people some incentive to have kids.
I was in the young men's presidency. I think I was even president. And of course, she went to church as just a person. She didn't have a job, I don't think, in the church. But we had, in Manhattan ward, we had, I would say 20 to 30 young men and women trying to get into the acting industry. New York, of course, has lots of
Nice.
plays and stuff like that. And they're hunting for jobs and stuff, but didn't have much to do. So I was asked by the bishopric to do some activities for them. So we put on a play production, every month
Wow.
for about a year.
My goodness.
You know, all kinds of ones. One of them with blacks, what do you call them? Minstrel show.
Yeah.
And one of them playing around. We did all sorts of fun things.
Cool.
That's not my.
And they were good. They were high quality because these guys were all professionals.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I didn't participate only once or twice, I think, as an actor. But
You were the director.
yeah. But I was
More of a producer.
pretty well trained in play production.
Awesome.
That's cool.
So let's start our own company.
Could do.
Chicken, I mean, turkey meal.
You know, costumes and
Mom will sew everything. Done.
scenery.
Brad will do scenery.
Bread is theory.
Implementation. They got to know me pretty good in the local used furniture,
I bet.
second-hand furniture, because we could buy them
Pretty cheap.
cheaper than you can
Make them.
make them or
Brand new.
rent them.
Oh, rent.
Now, did you have to pay for them, or was it paid for by the church?
Well,
If you remember.
I remember I didn't pay for them, but there wasn't much. We had a budget,
Sure.
but it was a very low budget, so it was mostly paid for by the students.
Nice.
They were interested enough in doing it, that they were willing to put up for their costumes and stuff like that. That they would make them themselves or
That's
whatever.
really nice.
Bless you.
It was a good experience. I enjoyed it.
So you and Grandma just met at church then?
Yeah, I don't think. I think she was in one of the shows, but because of her career, her time was not all her own.
Right.
It was a little hard for her to get away to practice and all that sort of stuff.
So how did you come to start dating?
Because Grandpa's a ladies' man.
Well, I met her at a ward dance,
Nice.
and I asked her to dance, and she said yes.
It was love at first sight. She was hooked ever since.
Awesome.
So what were the dances like? Were they held in the church buildings? Or
They were in the church buildings in the basement,
Oh, there you go.
but the basement was well developed. You know, it was. We held meetings in a building that was some other denomination. It wasn't Jewish, but it was some Protestant organization. And it was old, but it was in good condition.
Cool.
And had the chapel upstairs, and the classrooms and stuff were downstairs. There were no classrooms on the side. All the churches around here, you have a chapel, and then you have all the classrooms around it.
Right.
This one had here, and then down underneath it had all the classrooms.
Interesting.
Because the ground was very expensive. Here, right next door, there was another building, and
Right next door.
there's nothing in between.
And then multiple floors will belong to different people now, right?
Yes,
Last time I was in New York, I remember going into a McDonald's, and then there's a locked door in the back, and I peeked through it, and there was mailboxes there because there was an apartment complex that was just above it, and so people would have to walk through the McDonald's to go up into their
rooms.
Yeah. So
Could be.
The churches in the church in DC is a couple floors in a big building like that too, and they have to go up through the elevator. It goes through several office buildings before you get to the church.
The church in Virginia, Connor showed me, was in a shopping mall.
Nice.
It was just a little space, like next to it was like some tobacco store or something.
That is funny.
Well, the temple in New York City is right in the Columbus Circle, which is a major transit.
Yeah.
I have a picture in front of it. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it wasn't that way then.
Yeah.
We didn't have a temple. We only had one chapel
Wow.
when I was there.
In all of New York City?
In all of New York City. Oh no, in all of Manhattan.
Still.
There was wards in Queens, Brooklyn, not in the Bronx, Westchester.
Yeah. Not the Browns.
Well, I was, of course, born in New York City. Actually, I was born in Brooklyn, and the Brooklyn Chapel, which doesn't exist any longer. I guess all my brothers were, I was baptized there, and they were baptized there. Born in New York Hospital, and shortly after I was born, it burned down.
It's like we perfected it. We're done with this whole giving.
That was, yeah, something like that. But as a result of that, all the records were burned in New York. All the birth certificates were made at the hospital, and they all burned down. So there was no birth certificate for me.
Oh no! So you were never born.
So I was never born.
According to the federal government.
They can't track you.
Let's keep it that way.
Well, as a matter of fact, they had some kind of a record, I don't know what it was, but it was called, on my date, there was somebody born male Fletcher. I have 5 brothers.
Right.
Love you.
One of them came out that day. Cool.
But when I had to go on a mission, of course, I needed a
Birth certificate.
passport.
Yeah.
When you get a passport, you gotta
So
have a
how'd
birth
that
certificate.
go?
Well, I didn't have to do much of it. My dad was very kind in making, since it really was his responsibility. I wasn't there when I was born.
You were there, but you weren't there.
Mentally, I wasn't there. Anyway, he went to all the places I was when I was born. And the church members and some business members. And he got all the affidavits and took it up to the
Wow.
naturalization and so forth.
Witness statements.
And he
and
got the birth certificate for me.
That sounds like a pain.
Well, I was in school while all this was going on because I left school for my mission before I graduated. So I didn't go to graduation. And they sent me my graduation certificate later on.
Okay.
But well, so got some more questions?
Or what was your house like when you were growing up in New York? Was it a big house? Small house? Was it an
It
apartment?
was fairly big. I would consider by California standards it was 2-story, 3-story.
Wow.
Actually, it had a basement and actually 4. It had an attic too.
Cool.
So in that sense, it was big. And the older boys, when I was growing up, boys were up in the attic. Us in between boys and girl was in the 2nd floor. And the 1st floor was all eating and living room and stuff like that. And then the basement was the rec hall.
Cool.
I can give you some stories about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to talk about this or not, but we used to fight, a bunch of boys,
Sure.
Oh, they would know.
We understand that.
and to the extent it got violent. And at my point, I had no defense, so I threw a pair of scissors at my brother and stuck it in him.
Where?
Back.
Nice.
And he, another brother, threw a rock at me and hit my glasses,
How dare they?
sent me to the hospital.
So you threw more scissors.
If it makes you feel better, I stuck a screwdriver in Josh's shin once. So.
You too?
Was that me or was it you? I thought it was me.
That was me.
I thought it was me.
We were playing chicken, and so
Gotta get your story straight now.
That was one of us.
Someone will be asking you all these questions.
I can confirm that was me. Well, if not both of us, I know I did it as well.
That'd be funny if it was both of you.
You
too.
We were playing where you
I was
know
there.
where you would take the knife and you throw it into the ground next to the guy's foot in the movie. We watched a movie like that, so we got screwdrivers and we're doing that. And yeah, Josh won.
You weren't very good at it.
Or he lost. Oh, man.
You win because he was about being brave
He
and not
did
checking me
move.
out.
Yeah, he didn't move. Yeah, and it stuck. He started jumping around, it fell out, but I mean, it stuck there for a second.
We had a basketball
Hoop?
hoop, yeah, essentially, and built a homemade backboard
Nice.
and enough rounds so that we, as kids, as a family, could play basketball. Five kids and me, a little kid. So
Yeah.
they went 2 and 3, where I was one of the 3. But as a result, I learned to play basketball pretty good.
Yeah.
And so when I was in high school, the first high school, I was on the freshman team right off the bat. And my second high school, I was on varsity.
Nice.
We did pretty well.
And you took basketball the farthest out of all your brothers, right? You were by far arguably the best athlete out of the brothers.
Well, I'd hate to say I was the best. I was the most competitive in the sense that I entered competitions.
Cool.
Uh,
Got it.
My basketball, I was on the team and we played other teams. I did pretty well, but not that well. In football, I played football as well. And we had a good team and we won every game but one.
Nice.
The game we lost was out of our district.
Uh-huh. So you were the best in your district then?
We were the best in our league, but we weren't even close to some of the good high schools. We were a private school, and we only played private schools. So they had teams like we did, whereas the bigger schools, of course, could hire and pay
Yeah. Got it.
basketball players, and they were much better.
Yeah, capitalism.
Yeah.
We were kind of proud, and I was a guard,
Uh-huh.
and we had a what do you call it, motto, nobody will make a touchdown through a line. And we didn't, even the good teams
Yeah.
didn't ever make a touchdown in the line. They
Nice, they had the all
Yeah,
that's
passed.
cool.
all passed, yeah.
Yeah.
Which says our line was better than our back. But we were never scored on except for that one game.
Wow.
We had every game was 33-0 or
Wow.
something like this.
That's really cool.
Very cool.
So we had a pretty good defense,
Yeah.
and of course we were both defense and offense.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough
Nothing.
players,
The numbers, yeah, the switch around.
and I guess that's the reason the big school was able to. They could specialize on both offense and defense.
Yeah. So basketball, football, what other sports did you play? Was that it?
That was pretty much it.
Okay.
I did some track. I did some running, and so in the spring, what I did just to keep myself healthy,
Yeah.
would run track, maybe 3 miles a day or something like this,
Got it. So would you run with the track team or just run the track?
just by myself.
Got it.
The only time I really competed was when I was in college. We had an intramural track meet, and I ran the mile,
Yeah.
and I came in second.
Nice.
I almost came in first, but I had a cramp in the last 100 yards.
Oh, man.
Those are the worst.
But so I had a 5-minute, 25-second or something,
Really?
which
really
wasn't,
fast.
I considered pretty good.
Yeah.
Had they broken the 4-minute mile at that point?
Yes.
I don't know, I think so.
Yeah. But it was pretty recent, right? Within the last, 20 years of that, probably?
No, earlier than that.
50s.
Oh, okay. Got it. Sorry.
I was not trying to break the.
Oh, yeah. I'm just curious. Wanting to know a frame of reference. Still faster than my mile. I don't
Yeah.
think I ever ran a mile that fast.
Don't sit. That's my spot.
Well, I had done a number of, running 3 miles in an afternoon or something. I didn't do 3 miles fast. They were generally pretty slow,
Which you did, which
but
is impressive.
enough that I had a pretty good stamina at 1 mile.
So what temple were you sealed in? When you and Grandma got married, what temple were you sealed in?
Oh, we were sealed in the Logan Temple because she was brought up in Cache Valley, Preston, Idaho, and she went. I think she went a year to the University of Idaho.
Okay.
So we came back from the east. She came back early, and I came back later. We were married there.
Cool.
I guess we went on a 2-week vacation, honeymoon.
Where'd you go?
No, I don't remember. It was a touring kind of a honeymoon. It was.
Back to the East Coast.
Were you heading somewhere while you were touring, or did you guys just go
I think we were headed back to the East Coast, essentially.
and just took it and
And
took
we
your time?
stopped. We stopped at interesting places. We stopped in Chicago, I remember,
Cool.
and of course, when we were anxious to get to New York, move into an apartment and get settled and so forth. And then she had taken her internship as a dietitian in New York, so she was very familiar with New York. It was no thrill. Some people who haven't been to New York always think that's a good place to go. I hated it. No, I hated it as it is now. When I was growing up, I could walk anywhere in Manhattan without any fear. And I did that one day. I walked from up in the Bronx down to the Bowery, which is the bottom of Manhattan, as a hike, and as to see what it was all like. I can just vaguely remember doing it, but I can't remember what I saw. But I was not afraid. I would not do that now.
Yeah, me neither.
Did you drive a cab in New York? Or was that
And
in
it was in Salt Lake.
Salt Lake you drove a cab?
You were a cabbie.
Yeah,
And you chased down a guy who ran into some people? Or?
I had a lot of experiences as a cab driver.
I bet.
I was driving cab in Salt Lake when I was 1 year at the University of Utah. I went there the year after I got out of the mission because I had to get back into the swing of technology, if you will.
Right.
And so I went to the University of Utah. It was relatively easy for me to get in there. My brother was president.
That'll do it.
Are you rooting for them now in basketball? The Utes? The University of Utah? They're doing good in basketball right now.
Yeah, they're in the
Sweet
16? Yeah, I noticed that. And the BYU got into the final, but I think were eliminated first time around.
They were eliminated first round.
But the girls are in it as well,
Right?
and they're still in it. So I think they're in the eight or
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
You root for both BYU and Utah, huh?
What a true
Well,
fan.
I don't usually. I root for Utah second. If they both play each other, then I'm for BYU. But otherwise, I'm for both of them, as well as a number of other places in the country.
So tell the story where you ran down the guy who ran over the people.
Okay, I was driving a cab, and I had nobody in my cab, so I was going from one stand to the other stand, which you were allowed to do. And I don't know if you know Salt Lake, but when the light changes in your favor, you just walk. And so there's a very crowded path across the street as the light changes, and then of course when it changes, it goes the other way. Well, I was standing for a red light, and a car came down the street the cross street that I was parked at
Yeah.
and didn't stop. It was going the other way. It went right into three or four or five people.
Wow.
And so I just kept on going. So I said, "Whoa, I'm not going to let that happen." So I pulled out, and of course the crowd had moved out, so I could get past them.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran down, and I ran in front of this guy, and I waited until the police came. And that's all I knew about it. I didn't know anything about the people that got hit. But the policeman came back to me later on, knowing that I had participated, and said the guy was drunk. And he said, what's worse, his wife had been driving, and she was drunk, so she said, "Hey, I can't drive, I'm drunk."
Yeah.
So he got out and drove and ran into people. That's the story there. It was kind of a gory one because seeing these people getting hit.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't see very much because if they were bleeding, I was gone by the time they started to bleed.
Right.
So you're kind of like a superhero. You're like the Flash. You ran off so fast you didn't even see the injuries start to bleed.
I think the people I talked to about it all thought I was crazy. Because you never know, the guy could have had a gun, or
It could have been anything. Yeah.
he could have run me down for that matter. I was surprised he stopped. I sort of edged over and then pulled in front of him.
You said you're in a cab? Were you working for a cab company?
Yeah, I was working for Yellow Cab. It's a good paying job, actually.
How many years did you work for the Yellow Cab Company?
One. Well, I was only in Utah 1 year. After my mission, I went to the University of Utah, and I had the opportunity of going to Columbia, and so I left Utah and went to Columbia. And it had the better physics department and better people.
Did you spend some time at MIT as well?
That's a different period of my life.
Okay.
When I graduated from high school, I was going to get drafted in World War II, and I thought I might as well take a job in the services that I wanted, so I joined the Navy. And the Navy tested me and said, "Hey, you ought to get in the officer training." I took a test, armed service test, and I was one of the few that got 100% on the test. So I said, "You should be going to school." So they sent me to Dartmouth, and I was there 3 semesters. That's a year, essentially. Because in those days, they had 3 semesters a year. And I did well. Most of the things I learned was learning at Dartmouth. I had already learned in high school, in our private school. It had a very qualified teaching staff.
Cool.
And so I got pretty good grades,
Yeah.
good enough so they didn't think I should stay there any longer. They needed some people. Just at that time was the first part of nuclear submarines, and so they needed some engineers and so forth who knew something about nuclear physics. And so they sent me to, excuse me, it was a little later that the submarine thing happened. At that time, there was mostly radar problems. And they had all these bombs from Germany to Britain. I forgot what they call them.
The, what do they call those? The,
At any rate, they would launch them,
Right.
and then they would steer them electronically with radar,
which was new. That was
and they could hit pretty accurately where they wanted to hit.
Right.
And so a way to defeat that, of course, is to get some other radar and try to jam it or do something.
Sure.
And that was called electronic warfare, and that's where they sent me from Dartmouth to MIT, which was a radar school.
Okay.
And MIT is Massachusetts Institute of
Oh,
Technology.
yeah.
Right.
Can't you jam radar with like heat sources or what generates a signal or whatever?
Yeah, and that's what they tried to do. So I went all over England looking for the devices to radiate your bodies when they get sore and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Physical therapy kinds of things.
Right.
And it turns out their frequency was just the ones that the Germans were using. So they got them out, and every time these things started coming over, they tried to
Okay.
stop them from being guided.
And did it
But
work?
they were not very, well, it was, the British claimed that that was successful, but the facts were the bombs kept coming. And it wasn't until British bombers and American bombers started hitting the places in Germany which was doing the radiation.
Mm-hmm.
It took a fair sophisticated system to guide these things, and so once you blow one up, it takes a little while to get another one, because you have to calibrate them, you know, in a different place. Then your guidance is a little harder, or different anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that was called electronic warfare, which is what I spent a good time in my life in that field. But at any rate, they sent me to MIT because it was a specialty in radar and electronic warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And then the war ended, and they didn't need us anymore, so they fired us. And so I left MIT for a little bit. In the process, they discharged me through the veteran hospital in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
and I caught jaundice. They didn't know that jaundice was contagious in those days,
Mm-hmm.
and I got, and I almost died. I went back from MIT home, and I was feeling lousy, so I went to the doctors. I went to a chiropractor because I was hurting. The jaundice makes all your joints hurt.
Yeah.
At any rate, I finally went to a regular doctor. He said, "Oh no, you've got jaundice, and you better go to the hospital." And he told me later that I was within about 2 weeks of dying.
Wow.
But they gave me some pills and everything and made me well. But meanwhile, of course, I now have left MIT, but I signed up to go back, and I did go back, and graduated. And the graduation was in June, and I went on a mission 5 days before my graduation. So I didn't, we drove all the way from Boston to Salt Lake. And I went on a mission to Scotland.
Who set you apart as a missionary?
Pardon?
Who set you apart as a missionary? Remember?
Yes, but I don't remember his name.
Prophet, apostle?
Apostle. And he was, I don't know if you remember, oh, you probably won't remember, but
Brigham Young?
no.
That was back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, right?
He gave a talk a month before he died,
I see that.
and the talk he gave was how much he believed in the gospel and the hereafter. It's a really inspiring talk. I've forgotten his name.
Bruce R. McConkie?
Joseph B. Worthland.
No, not Bruce.
That would have been too.
I'll have to look that one up. Anyway,
Okay. And when you went on a mission back then, was it 2.5 years?
it was,
Or 2 years?
Or a year and a half.
I left in June and got back in September.
Okay. So a little over 2 years, but. Or very short.
And as I told you a minute ago, I went to the University of Utah for that year after.
Right.
And then I went to Columbia
For your doctorate.
to get a doctorate, right?
And when you went on a mission, you had to go by boat to Scotland?
Yes, and the Queen Mary.
Wow.
Really?
Hey, that's really cool.
Isn't that the one that you can like visit in Southern California?
Yes,
Yeah.
Long Beach.
yes.
You weren't
You
in
can
one
have
of the
dinner
luxury
there.
suites though, huh?
Well,
Well, actually, I was.
the whole crew of missionaries was on the same boat because there was a lot of people going to Europe, and they went to Europe on this boat. I guess the church had special rates,
Right.
but maybe it wasn't very busy. It's wartime sort of thing. Anyway, yeah, it was much nicer.
His first
Am I getting mixed up? I'm wrong.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. I went on a what was used as a troop carrier.
That's what I thought. You went on one of the victory ships or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Which was not as nice as the Queen Mary.
It was not. It was a military stuff, and you had
Bunks.
4 bunk hide sleeping, and it was such that it was uncomfortable. We all slept on the deck, which they allowed us to do.
One thing I know about my dad, though, he does not get seasick. I would have thrown up the whole wagon. He doesn't have that problem.
So,
Yeah.
did Grandma have that problem? I'm just curious.
What?
Did Grandma get seasick?
I don't think Grandma got seasick.
Yes, she did more than me, at any rate.
Got it.
She
That's
did.
everybody.
Yeah.
When we went on the Black Sea, everybody else was sick, and Norma was feeling ill, but didn't throw up,
Mhm.
And then you were fine.
and I was fine. Yeah. I never had any trouble.
You would have been a
Hard
good pirate.
That's why you enlisted in the Navy, right?
No. No, I'd rather get drowned than shot at.
Yeah, me too.
There's some wisdom there, I think.
Pardon?
There's some wisdom there.
Oh,
Did you have your brothers or whatever in the Navy? Or
Harvey was enlisted as an officer, and he was in I guess the naval air, he had a funny experience that he tells, that he was the communications officer for a squadron, and once they were having some trouble with their ship, and he radioed to his whole squadron, abandoned ship, so they all left their ships,
As a joke?
and it was nothing wrong with the ship that he was in. And he said all these guys were jumping out of their airships. Anyway,
That's
I didn't have that experience. That was his.
right.
My experience was mostly scholastic, as
Right.
you can tell. Although I had to take courses in naval history and naval terminology and all that kind of stuff.
So when did you get your doctorate in?
When I was at Columbia, I studied, well, all of the stuff. Ended up in what they call microwave spectroscopy, which says if you shine on molecules different frequencies, some of them will absorb more than others, and by telling where those absorptions are, you can tell the structure of the molecule. And molecule I was involved in was chlorine, and the ordinary chlorine had been already evaluated, but I had a radioactive chlorine, and so I measured its what they call quadrupole moment, that is its shape.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah, and I did it essentially by getting some chlorine 39 from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where they got this as a byproduct while making atomic bombs.
Okay.
And whenever they got a batch, we ordered some and they sent it up to us. Then I had to make it into gaseous chlorine. And so a whole bunch of chemical glass blowing stuff. I then put it into this waveguide, which is just a tube, and wrapped it around with 15 feet of coil, and send electricity down this, and it made a magnetic field, and the magnetic field is mentally changed the shape of the absorption, and that actually it gave an absorption of about 8 or 9 peaks.
Okay.
And by telling the degree of separation, that essentially tells you the shape of the quadrupole.
Fascinating. So this is a lot of early work with. This is a lot of foundational study that went into electron microscopes and things of that nature. Is this a field that would have dovetailed eventually into that down the road, with the kind of electron imaging and stuff like that?
Or what did this form the basis for? What did they come do with your work?
Mine was chlorine has about 7 or 8 isotopes, and mine was one of those. 2 or 3 of them had been done already, but it had significance as to the nuclear shape of the atoms, and it gave us some information as to how nuclei are formed.
Wow.
So you think this had any impact on why your kids or grandkids all swam or played water polo because you were working with chlorine so much?
It just feels so familiar.
No, I never smelled it. I hope.
It wasn't
I don't
around,
remember
yes.
anyway.
Now, did you have some kind of incident with microwaves down in Point Loma with some Russian trawlers out there?
Oh yes. After I graduated, I went to after a couple of incidences with industrial, I went to Hughes, and then after Hughes, I went to electro-optical systems, and then I joined I worked for the Navy, and that's what he's talking about.
Was it NOSC or NELC? What was it first? Was it NELC first?
At first it was NELC, Navy Electronic Laboratory Center. And they changed its names twice after that before I left. But shortly after I left, it became an engineering support group. That is, they would go out and fix things in the Navy.
And you were a civilian in the Navy, but you had held the equivalent rank of a commander or
Admiral,
admiral. Okay.
yeah.
That's cool.
Did you have one
Well,
of those hats with all the scrambled eggs on it or whatever? Or?
I never wore a Navy uniform. Oh, excuse me, I never wore one while I was a civilian.
Right.
I wore a Navy uniform when I was
In the Navy.
Yeah.
in the Navy. You wanted that incident. We in electronic warfare, there are lots of things, and the Russians would like to know all the things that we were doing in the electronic warfare business. So they had a great big, they had what essentially was a tugboat.
Well, and then your NELC was down in Point Loma,
Oh
in
yeah,
San Diego.
excuse me.
So you were right on the tip of the Point Loma.
So, and a lot of things
On the
we did
subway.
out over the ocean and so forth.
Right.
Well, they had this tugboat, which they sat off the coast a ways, inside the 3-mile limit, but, and then they would just pour power into our systems, and because they were close up, they essentially burned them out.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah,
Well, they said they were a fishing trawler, right? Or
they claimed they were a fishing trawler.
yeah.
And so we built one just like theirs,
And zapped him back?
and threw it out there and zapped them back. And they complained. They complained that we were interfering with their fishing.
Funny.
You melted all their
Just didn't say
instruments,
what
right?
they were fishing for.
Yeah.
They didn't melt them, but they burned out all of the electronics,
Yeah.
the receivers and so forth.
Did you have another incident where somebody was working with microwaves and it got turned on accident and the person was killed with the microwaves? Or?
Well, I didn't have that personally,
No.
but my Professor Towns,
Oh, Charlie Towns or?
Charlie Towns,
Yeah.
told a story of somebody who was working on an instrument, and somebody accidentally turned it on and burned him.
And it was a microwave thing, right? Or,
Wow.
Now Charlie Towns is significant because he was one of the laser pioneers.
Well, I would say he was instrumental in developing the lasers.
Back when you were working with him too, or?
Yes, but not in lasers.
Okay.
I was his student in electromagnetics. The frequencies of the resonances in chlorine were around 35,000 gigahertz, and took a little special equipment. It hadn't been done before because they didn't have the equipment. We built the equipment
Awesome.
so that we could take these measurements. And I wasn't the first one doing that kind of thing. We had a whole group there doing the same sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you were doing it the best, of course.
But of course.
That's a matter of opinion.
We're not biased.
I did it sufficiently to get a PhD.
Which is good.
That's no small thing.
Well, that was the end of my college career, pretty much.
Now your father's second wife, Aunt Fern, was an Iring.
Yes.
So what is the connection there? I always get it wrong. Which
I
Iring?
probably will get it wrong too.
Okay.
Fern Iring was my mother's sister, and she married a guy named Carl Iring. If you were at the BYU, there was
That's
some
his
things.
science center? Iring Science Center. is
Yeah,
his.
yeah. And
I
that's
had
that's the
classes in
guy.
that building.
At any rate, he was related to the Henry Iring at the University of Utah, and I'm not sure of that relationship. I'm sorry. I think he was a nephew or something.
Okay.
But at any rate, what was of interest, Mark was saying, is that his wife Fern, after her husband died, married my father. So Fern Iring was my mother-in-law.
No.
I remember once that she said, "Oh, you're going on a mission. Let me show you how not to do a handshake. Here's a dead fish." And she put her hand down, and I shook it, and it was just limp. And that's not the right way to do a missionary thing.
Oh, see, that's good. I don't remember that at all.
She was probably 90 at the time, so we're
Right.
mostly dead fish anyway.
I may not have even been there.
It was one of the times we were visiting.
Well, before Mother and Dad, before she married Dad, she was our aunt because she was my mother's sister.
Right. So we always called her Aunt Fern.
And she was our Aunt Fern, and we used to go and visit her all the time. When I was young, she enjoyed us coming to her and staying at her house even. So
So they both Grandpa Harvey and Aunt Fern had a lively personality.
yes.
They liked to joke. And
Well, the interesting, I guess maybe the thing you were interested in, when my father started dating my mother,
Uncle.
when my father started dating my mother, they insisted on having a chaperone
Really?
in those days.
Uh-huh.
And the one that chaperoned was Aunt Fern. So he married the first and they married the second.
Evidently, he did a pretty good job.
A few years later, that is, of course.
They were more or less in their 80s by that time.
Yeah,
right?
85 was Dad. I don't know how old she was.
And Dad lived, Grandpa lived in 96.
So they were 10 years together.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Good long run.
And Harvey Jr. had a house right behind Harvey Sr. and there was a door in the hedge and
That's
two backyards connected.
That's right. And those two houses are still there, but neither of them belong to us.
Owned by member of family.
Harvey moved into a
Condo.
condo, and Dad, of course, passed away.
No upkeep.
We visited him. Dad and I visited at the condo at least once together.
I've been there a couple of times.
Right.
Cool.
I get a phone call from him, every couple of months. Maybe every. It was Christmas time, and it was last week actually.
That's nice.
And he was talking about how you feel when you're approaching death,
Oh no. Okay.
and he's looking forward to it. He says, "I miss my wife, and all the good times we had. I want to have them some more." So
He's 90, 91,
he's 92.
92.
Sorry,
Whoa.
I tried really hard.
Bob
not
is
to do it.
94. Bob is my brother older than that.
Is Bob still alive?
Pardon?
Yes.
Bob's still alive?
Oh yes.
His wife passed away of cancer.
Right.
He's alive and kicking.
And India
Well, Harvey's just passed away a year ago.
Just
Yeah,
passed away.
recently.
Bob's wife passed away.
a while ago. No.
A couple years ago.
And he's not used to being alone.
I thought, wasn't Aunt Dia in a home?
No,
Oh, he took care of her all the way to
she lived at home.
Oh, I just knew she wasn't doing well there.
I don't know whether Rosemary went to a hotel. I don't think so.
I don't think Rosemary went to home either, because when we went to visit her, she looked like on her last legs and she was at home.
And she was at home.
Yeah. And I think she passed away that year.
It's interesting that all of the wives of the Fletchers died before their husbands.
Yeah.
Longevity in the menfolk.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Oh well.
So tell us about your first few years working for the Naval Department professionally. Kind of start us chronologically and kind of move forward.
We went to Hughes first, right?
I went to Hughes, and then I went to Electro-Optical Systems. EOS is where I made some money.
Right.
I got
Move.
a number of shares and stock, which became very valuable. And then I went to NASA,
Really?
Cambridge,
Very cool.
and then Kennedy was shot, so they closed NASA down in NASA in Cambridge.
Yeah.
That was his baby.
Yeah.
And I went to Point Loma, Navy.
Got it.
And your office was down by where the subs were.
Well, you go to Point Loma, there's a hill, and there's a building on top of that hill. And in my office, I could look out, see the bay, and then down in the bay was the naval nuclear substation.
One of our partners lives in Point Loma.
It's an expensive place.
Yeah, its house was
A lot of money.
$700,000 or $800,000. No.
Where does he live on Point Loma?
It's an old part of town. I don't know. I can't remember. I've been there. It's an older home.
Was it on the bay side or the ocean side?
It's on the bay side, closer to the airport. So
Yeah, they're not quite as expensive as the ones on the other side, but they're still pretty dear.
I remember you would bring lasers home every so often from work.
Oh yeah, that's in those days. That was now you can bring them. I got one in my house over there.
We have 3
Yeah, I
or 4
think
here.
you gave it to me.
Yeah. We have green ones and blue ones and red ones.
They weren't as common in the days that I was working with them.
I remember you bring home some man-made gems, rubies and rods.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then you brought home some holograms. They look like smoked glass, but you'd shoot the laser at an angle at it, and you could look at it and see the image, and turn it and see all sides of the image inside the.
Yeah, that had a lot of promise, but that promise has never been fulfilled yet.
Which promise is that?
The holograms.
Holograms.
Tell Cody how it worked, wasn't it?
I say back when I was younger, they'd bring home holograms, and you'd look like a piece of glass that was smoked.
Uh-huh.
Then you'd shoot the laser at it at a certain end. You could look in and see a 3D image of whatever they'd taken the picture of. And you could turn it, and you could see different sides to it.
I have something like that in some of these greeting cards that you can
Right.
look at them in different angles and see different things. But that's not a very useful thing for the Navy.
No.
I was thinking they could do more computer applications and lay down different images and.
Well, people have talked. It takes an awful lot of computer power to make one hologram,
Right.
and I don't know about changing the hologram to
Different things.
see different things. I'm not even sure how that would work.
Remember, we go to your office and they had these models of these battleships there. That
Oh
were,
yeah.
what, 4 or 5 feet long or 6 feet long, but were very accurate reproductions of the ships.
Right. When I first went there, we had ships in the Navy still communicating with radio frequencies.
Uh-huh.
And those ships had problems communicating on the ships because the ship's shapes affected the transmission from there to wherever they're transmitting to. Particularly as the ship went around and rocked and so forth, it would cause the communications to go out. And so what they did is built these models. They cost a lot of money, of course. And then they put them out on a range with sensors all over. So then they try to communicate with the ship, not at the same frequencies because these were smaller ships. So you had to compensate for that by changing the frequency. But they could then tell when they were going to have trouble by putting new equipment on board the ship. So anytime they put new metal ships on the top of the ship, they would go send it through this range to see whether they're going to have any. It was a test range for testing electromagnetic interference. They don't have that problem anymore because they don't communicate that way anymore.
Right. How big were those models?
Well, I guess the carriers were from here to there.
Right.
The other ones are from here to the end of the table, maybe.
Anywhere from 5 to 8 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have fond memories. They were pretty cool looking ships.
Yeah, well, they're awesome to see because they're exact models.
Right, exact replicas of the ships.
I guess they're still in the museum there.
You say, what did they ever do with those? So if they're throwing them away, we'll take them.
What would you do with them?
We'll put them in a museum somewhere.
Take pictures of them.
You couldn't put them in the water. They're all metal.
Well, I remember one time we went and there was a substance, I can't remember if it was coal and you pour it out and it'd ball up and you could push it and it would go, was it liquid mercury or something that
Well, there's always liquid mercury. We don't.
That would be poisonous. I don't know.
That
what
was
this
before we knew
Yeah.
anything about it.
But something we'd pour out and then we played with it a little bit on the table.
I think that was liquid mercury.
Yeah. It was pretty neat though, actually, because it was big balls of it.
It's cool.
But said it's really not as toxic as,
Well, not so far.
well,
We didn't drink any of it.
no. But you know, the amount that you get in a thermometer and so forth,
Uh-huh.
not very much. Not a little. Tiny drop.
Yeah, it's pretty
Mercury
fun.
and silver.
I guess you could swallow it, but not many people take their thermometers and break them up and then.
Suck it out. Yeah.
That's a special person, yeah.
So it really is not that much of a threat. But they make big deals about them,
Right.
batteries and things.
And you were a part of the Old Crows too. What was the Old Crows?
The Old Crow is, well, when they were having these bombs come in and they're having what they call electronic warfare,
Right.
they're around the world are having the same kind of problem. So the organization which studied and developed the weapons for and against were called Old Crows. And the reason that was that the guys who worked on it mostly during World War II were old guys, and they called themselves the Old Crows.
Crows. Okay.
Cool.
This was a worldwide club.
Yeah, there were something, I guess, 10,000 or 15,000 members.
Remember, we go to meetings sometimes.
Well, I was in charge of one of their annual events, and it was held at Point Loma. And so I got to know some of the admirals and all that sort of stuff.
That's cool.
And when you'd go and have the cocktail parties, you'd have a Fletcher special. Remember what that was?
Oh yeah,
Okay. Well, what goes into a Fletcher special?
ginger ale and orange juice.
Sounds good. I like that.
Let's do it.
Vinegar and orange juice?
Ginger ale.
Oh, got it.
That was his mixed drink at the cocktail parties.
Well, I looked enough like a cocktail that nobody would ask me questions.
Right.
But many of the cocktails I went to with people from work, my boss would go there and say, he'd come up to me and say, "Oh, I'm going to get your Fletcher special." And ran and got some ginger ale and some orange juice. And he essentially told everybody that I wasn't drinking.
Well, you went to France once and you had all the wine glasses and
Oh, yeah,
you had to tell
that's
them
it.
they were drinking. So.
When I was,
And they didn't kill you or anything.
no, they were a little upset.
So they just looked at you with disdain. They're French now. Let's be serious.
That's just their
But you
choice.
go to France every other year or so to.
Yeah, I was in charge of a group of engineering companies and different parts of the services to investigate some of the capabilities that France had in infrared solid-state devices. And we were building some of the same, but theirs were better.
So France actually did something better. So,
Yeah.
so there you go.
At any rate, they were happy to come see what we were doing, and we were happy to go see them.
Mhm.
So I gathered a bunch of people from the United States who were involved in this kind of business, and we went over there, and then they had another group, and they came over here. On one of these trips, we went to a firm in the middle of the wine country, and they served us dinner, or lunch, and they had a glass for every course, a glass of wine and of course the wine would be different for every course. And I had them pour water in all of mine, of course. And then eventually they got around and said, "What's wrong? Don't you like our wine?" And I said, "No, it's
I don't like anybody's wine.
it's not healthy to take too much wine. My church says it's not healthy." And they said, "What church is that?" And I told them, "It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." And they just don't believe in alcohol of any kind. And they'd say, "Well, who told you that? Christ took wine."
It wasn't French wine.
I told them that we're not quite sure what kind of wine that was. Oh, he told us that people who drink too much wine get affected. "Who told you that?" And I told them, "Well, Heavenly Father told us that." And they said, "Oh, that shut them up." They had an argument. I had a hard time arguing with Heavenly Father. They could argue with my understanding of who Heavenly Father is, but we didn't get into that discussion at all.
Well, shall we take a break?
Yeah.
We're going a long time.
It's been an hour and a half. That's pretty good.
Good job. Thanks, Deb.